Welcome to Keeping Money Local, a Southern Illinois seminar series. My name is Byron Fager from the Southern Illinois Community Foundation, and I'll be your host this evening. I want to take a second to recognize our organizers, the Southern Illinois Community Foundation, Carbondale Spring, Cristados, and the Southern Illinois Collaborative Kitchen, the Climate Economy Education Incorporated, Egyptian Electric Cooperative Association, and the City of Harrisburg. Special thanks to financial support from Carbondale Spring, Egyptian Electric Cooperative Association, and in-kind donations from shopcarbondale.com web services. Let's take a moment to hear from our sponsor, Carbondale Spring, and Sonia Kruger.
Hello, and thank you for being with us this evening. My name is Sonia Kruger, and I represent Carbondale Spring People's Movement. Our mission is to create the solutions to meet the basic needs of every person in town. 2 years ago, we came together to develop a system of mutual support. After a year of research and weekly meetings, 4 programs were organized. These programs include food autonomy, solar renewable energy development, cooperative small business ownership, and care worker response. In 2020 alone, the Food Autonomy Board coordinated 3 summer gardens, 2 fall gardens, and provided the labor, funds, and resources for them. The community gardens provided specialized training, led to the construction of 15 chicken coops, door-to-door produce deliveries, free meal programs, educational outdoor workshops, and the cultivation of a new food forest led to plant and tree giveaway programs. To learn more about the cumulative impact of Carbondale Springs' mission, visit us at our website, carbondalespring.org.
Thank you, Sonia. So let's take a few moments to look at the parameters for this evening. So we're pleased to have 4 speakers set up for you tonight. In the interest of time and making sure we get through the core presentations, we're going to ask that you please enter your questions into the Q&A or into the chat if you can't get to the Q&A. And at the end, we'll work our way through as many as possible. But please use that chat functionality to ask your question right when you're thinking of the question, and then we'll be able to come back to that later. So our first speaker tonight is Sandra McCardle. She is the coordinating director at the Cooperative Catalyst of New Mexico. Sandra is the co-founded a national purchasing and marketing cooperative, energy efficiency microbusinesses. She has assisted a cooperative network of international agencies to work on alternative energy in Afghanistan and founded and developed the New Mexico statewide Green Jobs Collaborative. She is on the board of the American Sustainable Business Council, serves on the working committee of One Worker, One Vote, and owns a small energy efficiency consulting business. Sandra, welcome. Well, Sandra, we can't hear you. Your mute's on. Oh, Sandra, I think we're still not hearing you.
Is that better?
There we go. Thank you.
Yay! Thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate being part of this phenomenal program. And I look forward to watching and listening to all the other programs that I haven't been able to listen to yet. Hiram, I can't see if you have the slides up or not. There we go. Excellent. So if you can put it on slideshow and go to the next slide, that would be great. Oh, you're so good. Let me just give you a thumbnail sketch of the Cooperative Catalyst. We started talking about the idea about 4 years ago, formed about 3 years ago. And what we are is a cooperative developer. We like to help people either create or convert to cooperatives. And we work statewide and eventually regionally as well. Our mission is kind of aligned with what you folks are doing, which is to empower communities to create local wealth through the development of cooperatives, and the creation of a generative cooperative ecosystem. So that's one of the reasons that we're pretty excited about what you're doing. And I've been asked to speak a little bit about worker co-ops today. Next slide, please. Yeah. So just to give a little bit of background in case people are not familiar with cooperatives, I stole this graphic from a course I was on. But the cooperative really has three different elements that distinguish it from other groups. There is cooperative decision-making and control, ownership, shared ownership, and distribution of profits. You can see that it also is set in the world. So it's people-centered, focuses on the economy, the society, and the environment. But what's really important is the purpose of the cooperative. What is it created to do? Next slide, please. And then you're going to have to keep hitting this, I'm afraid. So this is one of those fancy slides that I can't figure out. But how cooperatives compare to a standard business. You have members who are users and participate in the business instead of shareholders who are making a financial investment. And in the case of a corporation, often whoever has the most shares gets the most votes and power on the board, whereas in a cooperative, it's democratic, one member, one vote. The decision-making is local. The contributions and investment are made by members, and rather than necessarily the shareholders who employ the people. And non-member investors do not have the decision-making power. In Mondragon, which is one of the larger cooperatives in the world, their description is that it's the primacy of labor over capital. I'm sorry, you're getting background noise. Okay, sorry. And profits are distributed to members based on participation with limited return to investors. Can you keep clicking through again there, Byron? And more importantly, the money from the business and the jobs stays in the local economy. It doesn't go to shareholders who may be wherever they are. So that's why those little dollar bills flipped over to the other side. Next slide, please. Cooperative principles and values are really what define a cooperative. There are many different forms, but all of them adhere to these principles and values. And I won't go over them, you can read them, but in your case, I think the most important principles would be cooperation among cooperatives and concern for the community. Just looking quickly at values, those particular values are one of the reasons that cooperatives in general appeal to both those who are conservative and those who are liberal. It's one of the few things that you can get folks to agree on. Next slide, please. So nationally, cooperatives are pretty important. There are 65,000-ish of them, and many of us are members of cooperatives. I wanted to talk a little bit about the cooperative moment because we are in a situation where so many things are changing. Cooperatives are one answer to the many challenges that we're all facing. You know, I think we can all agree that the system's broken, something's not working, and the time when people worked for one company all their lives, they're just gone. My first job out of college was working for General Motors. My first month on the job, I attended a retirement party for somebody who got his gold watch for having been there 50 years. And I vowed then that I was never going to do that. Luckily, the economy has changed around me, so I never had the opportunity. In addition to that, COVID, of course, is devastating local economies and changing our world. And then, I don't know whether you see this in your area, but there's also a change in demographics between people are moving from cities to small towns and rural areas, and that's going to confuse things a whole lot. But the last thing I wanted to mention on this slide, regarding this slide, is that cooperatives are not new. They go way back to before humans were humans, and they haven't always been called cooperatives. They've been called all sorts of things over the years, including, would you please go help your cousin? His car's dead, and he needs some help. As well as barn raisings. Here we have an acequia system, which is a shared water allocation. Next slide, please. So characteristics of cooperatives are one that they're created really to solve problems faced by members, and some of those problems that members might want to deal with might be those who want to increase profitability or reduce costs of businesses that they already own. So that's the classic grain elevator type of example. Might be for entrepreneurs who just really don't want to take that step on their own. They want to do it in a shared way, and a cooperative is one way to do that. It might be for those entrepreneurs for whom the current system just does not work. In this point in time, for example, a lot of women with young children who can't work in a traditional way because there's no child care. And also to meet changing circumstances in new ways. So these advantages are varied, and they're only a subset, but since every cooperative is different, these are the ones that would apply to most. Next slide, please. So looking at the types of cooperatives, they're generally divided into four. The multi-stakeholder or hybrid being a catch-all, but some people will have 10 or 12 or more types of cooperatives. It depends how thinly you slice it. There are characteristics that they share, however. So if you look at a worker cooperative, the purpose is generally a social one. So they're quality jobs or self-help, or they might have a complex set of goals. Might be a grocery in a food desert, for example, where there are multiple, where the producers are also the workers. The purpose of the membership is generally quality jobs, a voice in what they earn, and fair economic distribution. And they tend to be small unless they aggregate in some way by forming networks. Next slide, please. This is the traditional busy slide with examples of different types of cooperatives. I noticed that you have a local cooperative grocery co-op called the Co-op, And so put that on there, but there are many other kind of cooperatives here. I'm happy to talk more about them at the end, but I just want to highlight a couple of strange ones. The Assured Auction Mart is a livestock auction mart in Manitoba. It started as a small business and then converted to a cooperative in 1958. REI, you all know. REWE is a German company, and that's they have a whole bunch of different stores, and they're one of the top 10 cooperative groups in the world. I think you can move on. We can talk more later. So next slide, please. Thank you. The picture is there because we in New Mexico are kind of partial to hot things, and we think worker-owned cooperatives are hot stuff. They benefit the many, not the few, and they allow workers to benefit from the value that they create. So what each worker puts in is proportional to what they're able to take out, or vice versa. And they're able to build their assets and skills through running a business in a cooperative manner. You can see that the employee outcomes are frequently that people are more committed, they stay longer, they put in a lot more effort, and they really treat the business as their own because it is. There's also increased productivity and innovation, and of course, return on equity, which goes to those workers. This, by the way, is from the, this is a recent study. We'll get to resources at the end. Next slide, please. So just quickly, when you're talking about a cooperative, we all know the traditional hierarchical organizational chart. If you look at cooperatives, it's flipped. So the board of directors is not at the top, the members are, and they elect the board of directors who may or may not choose management, and there may or may not be employees. And then in a worker co-op, those employees are the members. In consumer producer co-ops, obviously, those are the members, but the worker co-op is the one where the employees are the members, and they're the ones at the top. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. These are, I think you guys are going to be getting the slides, so I don't want to read through all of this, but, and the last bullet point there, Rob can speak to because he's one of the authors. But the point is really that cooperatives perform really well, not only when the economy is good, but also when the economy is not so good. And that if there is a substantial investment in cooperatives and in the ecosystem that supports them, you really can change the economy locally. Just highlighting Rob's article there. Once an investment was made in cooperatives in Finland between 1987 and 2006, there were 2,921 new cooperatives who are now forming at a rate of about 150 to 200 a year. Next slide, please. So looking at what has happened, this is from a preliminary study on worker co-ops during the pandemic. What have worker cooperatives done? They pivoted to address the needs of their communities. They focused on decision-making, mutual aid, and they've engaged in business planning that's resilient. What can we do now? And they've also stabilized the workforce. You can see that the kept same workforce is the largest line there, but there's a famous story from Mondragon in the 2008 recession where the Mondragon is a huge cooperative of cooperatives, and one of their businesses was not doing well. So at one point they decided to close it, but everybody else, nobody lost their jobs. Everybody voted to take a pay cut to support the workers whose jobs were lost, and then they were retrained to come back into other businesses. Next slide, please. There's also been a strong community focus with worker-owner cooperatives, and you can see many of the things that they've been doing here, but one of the things is focusing on community. And the arts cooperative, which we helped work with, which is Ancestral Rich Treasures of Zuni, one of the things that they did was they found a grant to allow them to purchase art from more customers than they had before, which they then sold on an online auction. And then they got another grant because that had been so successful, and they started giving the grants out in kind of an uplifting, let's try to create some enthusiasm here way for the community, which has been devastated by COVID. And so they've really taken their role as a beacon of hope really seriously. Next slide, please. Thank you. So cooperative development, much like business development, follows a particular process. And this happens to be ours, but everybody who works with cooperatives works with them in some sort of a way that pretends to be linear, but just like business consulting really isn't. However, there are different stages that you have to go through for a successful cooperative business. Next slide, please. And you can go past that one. There's some resources here that might be useful. And you folks might be interested in the last video on the reaction of cooperatives around the world to the pandemic in particular. It's more of an inspiration than information. There's also information there. And if you could go to the last slide. I just had to highlight what I've been doing during the pandemic. I've been bird watching, and my daughter had a son, so I have a COVID grandson, and that's my contact information. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Sandra. All right, so our next speaker. Okay, let me get back here. So as a reminder, we are wanting you to put questions into the chat window and in the Q&A so we can come back and ask Sandra at the end. So our next speaker is Rob Brown. He is the director of the Cooperative Development Institute's Business Ownership Solutions, the BOS program. The CDI's mission is to build a cooperative economy through the creation and development of successful cooperative enterprises. BOS promotes employee ownership, works with businesses with business owners and their employees to facilitate conversions. And he was part of an advisor group that successfully converted 3 retail businesses into the Island Employee Cooperative, which is now the largest worker cooperative in Maine and the 2nd largest in New England. Rob participates in several national networks promoting the strategy of employee ownership conversion and best practices in the field, including as a 2015 DAWI Cooperative Developer Fellow and as a member of the Workers to Owners Collaborative. Rob joined CDI in 2012 as the main housing program manager in CDI's NEROC program, working to convert worker-owned parks into resident-owned cooperatives. He has a diverse background in community organizing, communications, nonprofit and for-profit business development, and public policy development and advocacy. Welcome, Rob.
Hello. Let's see, let's do the magical screen share. There we go. So, thank you all. Thanks for putting on this workshop and thanks for inviting me. My name is Rob Brown, and I'm going to build on what Sandra talked about, is sort of a general education around cooperatives and worker cooperatives, and talk about a particular use of worker cooperatives in preserving businesses and jobs through transitions. Sometimes I'm going to get into some of the motivations around it, but there's a practice that I do with our program here in New England and upstate New York, where I work, and also throughout the country. There are practitioners who just really focus on this one type of cooperative development, which is the conversion of existing businesses into worker cooperatives. So first, just a little bit about CDI. We've been around since 1994. We are the U.S. Department of Agriculture designated Northeast Center for Cooperative Business Development. We work across most cooperative development sectors. We have a large housing program. We do a lot of work in agriculture. And then there's the program that I run, Business Ownership Solutions. These are just a few pictures of some companies that I've worked with, from grocery stores to coffee roasters and cafes and landscaping companies and solar engineering and installation companies. So wide variety of companies. We do a lot of work. We do a deep dive with companies we work with, everything from sort of the initial inquiry and exploration by business owners and workers. We do financial and feasibility analysis, business valuations. We have a CPA on staff that does that work. Business planning, transaction structuring. We help them access financing. We are not lenders, but we have close relationships, strategic partnerships with lenders that finance the deals we bring to them. And then after a transition, we continue to work with companies for at least a few years in a coaching, education, technical assistance program to help them get up on their feet and get sustainable after that transition. So I believe there's a rationale and an urgency for this work rooted in simple demographics of business owners. These are national surveys. Nationally, half of business owners are over 55 years of age. If you are talking about companies of 15 employees or greater, the median age of those business owners is closer to 60. So the bigger companies that employ more people, the owners tend to be older. And yet when you look at exit planning surveys of business owners nationally, 79% want to retire within 10 years, 57% in less than 5 years, and a third in less than 3 years. Keep in mind that a well-planned and executed exit plan should take into account 2 to 3 years. that tells you that people should be planning now, and yet only 17% of business owners have a developed plan for their exit. So you have aging business owners nearing retirement, wanting to retire in the next number of years, but haven't done anything to plan for that. That last statistic, I think, is important to point out, that 75% of business owners rely on that business as their primary source of income. They're not rich. They're earning an income. Maybe they're earning a good income, but they're still earning an income, a primary income from that business. And so the need to think about exit planning and their business as their retirement is important to them and important to our communities. And also, just why does this matter? If you look at the demographics around business closure and job loss, it's kind of grim. Even now, over half of business closings are due to owner retirement, and that is over time the largest single source of avoidable job loss in the U.S. Most of this is either census data or SBA data that we've collected, and a lot of business owners just think they'll wait and get a business broker, and a business broker will take care of it when they're ready to retire, but only 20% of business listings ever actually sell. And family successions are becoming less and less common and successful. These days, only about 15% of intergenerational business transfers succeed over the long term. And then I think for rural areas, this is all the more acute because the populations are older. In most of rural areas in the United States, the average age of a business owner is 60 plus, instead of nationally at 55 plus. So business owners are older, the businesses are even smaller, they're less resourced, and therefore the smaller and more rural the business, the greater the likelihood of liquidation and closure when an owner retires. So if we're thinking about rural communities, once that hardware store or that small business goes out and closes, it is unlikely that it will be replaced. So it's so much easier, if you're thinking in terms of economic development and community development and job creation, it is so much easier to hold on to the businesses we have and help them preserve past the life or the working life of the owner than it is to expect another business to come in and replace it and offer those same goods and services in our communities. This all adds up to what sort of popular journalists, demographers, etc., have referred to as the Silver Tsunami, this aging baby boomer business owner, aging baby boomer business owner wave that is oncoming, and just the demographics again paint a grim picture of, this is a quote from The Economist, I believe, trillions of dollars of business value are going to change hands in the next 10 to 20 years. And the question is, who is that, whose hands is that going to change into? Perhaps for larger businesses, more lucrative businesses, in more dynamic economies, private equity plays a role. Big fish eats little fish is pretty common. Competitors buy up businesses, but for a good number of businesses, probably the majority, and particularly in rural areas, liquidation and closure ends up being the most common. And that just has all sorts of negative ripple effects in terms of community assets, community resiliency, and jobs. And given the current moment, what seemed like a challenge that was somewhat slow moving, if we could think about this over the course of a few years, 5 years, maybe a decade, communities, economic development folks could think about this and address it in a somewhat methodical way. The whole thing has just come rushing. This is just a sampling of headlines for recent headlines, and the rate of business closure business closures that are not reopening in light of the economic challenges we face at the moment is pretty staggering. And again, it's hitting certain sectors dramatically. Some sectors are actually doing well, but by and large, this is what we're seeing is just a crush of business closures, and they're not reopening. So with that context, the work that we do is really focused on reaching business owners and workers, as well as some of the public sector and nonprofit sector and private sector business development, workforce development, communities, entities, to get them to understand what I just described, and that it is something that we really need to pay attention to and address proactively and forthrightly. And just the entry point of that really is around exit planning with business owners. So while I do cooperative development, technically, my entry point in talking with a lot of folks, doing presentations, talking to chambers of commerce and so forth, it's really about exit planning and promoting knowledge and awareness around the process and the options of exit planning so that business owners start thinking about this. And then as one of those options being employee ownership transitions. And if they're interested in that option and it makes sense, I can help them with it. If there's other options that make sense, I can connect them to resources to assist them with that. But it really is the starting point, the entry point there is just getting business owners to think about what is their plan to exit that business. And for a lot of business owners, they, as I said, you know, the vast majority of business owners want to retire in a decade or less, some much sooner, and yet very few of them are actually thinking about it or planning. So some of these factors that cause failure of businesses, the failure of exit planning and then the failure of the business that results, it could just be lack of planning or no planning at all. A lot of times the business owner just isn't being clear about what their goals are. What are their financial goals, their personal goals, their goals for their family, their goals for the business. And if you don't know what your goals are, you can't meet them, right? So there could be liquidity issues. Some businesses are just leveraged, over leveraged. It may be fine if you're just intending to run the business forever, but if you have liquidity issues where your debt just outstrips the value, you're in a tough spot. And if you don't start addressing that financially, you're never going to get out of that position, and that bodes ill for the business. Could be family succession issues. It's family. It brings all of its own separate set of complications. There could just be an inadequate successor management. Typically, a lot of small business owners make themselves indispensable, and they think that is making the business more valuable. But if you're trying to sell a business, if you made yourself indispensable, you've actually diminished the value of the business. And helping business owners understand that they need to have a clear management succession plan, and that somebody else needs to be able to run the business in their absence. Otherwise, it's not worth what they think it is, which leads to the next, obviously, unrealistic business value, or just improper deal structure in a million different ways that can just sink a business in a transition. So those are just a few of the things that are commonly seen amongst those who do exit planning work with business owners. So for tonight, we're talking about employee ownership, specifically the possibility of worker cooperatives. There is another form of broad-based employee ownership, employee stock ownership plans. I'm not even going to address those tonight, simply because while they can be very useful and very beneficial in a lot of instances, they really only work for a pretty small segment of the market. You have to be of a sufficient size in profitability and employee base for an ESOP to make sense. So you're talking about 10, 15, maybe 20% of the businesses out there have the sufficient scale for an ESOP to even begin to make sense. So we're talking about the large majority, 80 to 90% of the businesses out there that could never afford financially or complexity-wise the implementation of an employee stock ownership plan. For them, a worker cooperative transition could achieve some of the same goals in a much more flexible, light touch, low cost way. This is a quote from Entrepreneur Magazine. If you don't have a solid succession plan in place and intend to put your business on the market and hope for the best, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Employee ownership could offer you an escape route for this predicament. You'll be tapping into a pool of ready-made buyers that were right under your nose all along. Again, this was from an article in Entrepreneur, just like saying, hey, think about this option. You've probably never thought of this before, but this is the possibility of buyers that you already know, and the greater ease of an internal friendly sale can really do wonders for a business and deal with a lot of the complexities that can come from a public external sale, which brings a variety of challenges to a business. And a few of these statistics Sandra referenced, but I wanted to reinforce them in that employee ownership is good for business. It's by no means the largest or even a large segment of the economy, but it's a sizable segment. There's over 7,000 firms in the US with 13.5 million employee owners. Compared to conventionally owned businesses, there's reams of studies, decades of research, longitudinal research. It just shows that employee-owned firms, compared to similarly situated conventionally owned businesses, create more jobs in the good times, lay off fewer workers in downturns, and are consistently more productive and more profitable. And if you think about it, that makes sense. The whole notion that a group of workers feel truly vested in the success of the business because there is both material reward and the sense of ownership that comes with that leads to better outcomes for the business. And additionally, for communities and workers, there are great benefits to think about in terms of promoting employee ownership. These first set of statistics are from a very large longitudinal study, tracked, I believe, about 19,000 young people from age 18 to age 35, all over the United States, working in all sectors, all demographics, and found that young people who worked in employee-owned firms had 33% higher wages, 92% higher household wealth, and 53% higher median job tenure. So all these things that particularly rural areas think about and are concerned about with youth retention, youth attraction, employee ownership has been proven to help with that. Also with household income and household wealth for low to moderate income workers, also a Rutgers study, a very large Rutgers study, showed that they have dramatically higher household wealth for LMI workers, particularly those nearing retirement, and that there was a significant narrowing of the gender and racial wealth gap. So I think these two slides are important. It's good for business, it's good for workers, it's good for communities, lots of good benefits that can come from that. Sandra gave a broader definition of cooperatives. I just want to hone in on what we're talking about here with a worker cooperative. It is a business that is jointly owned and controlled by the people who work in it and that operates for their benefit. So one way to think about this, unlike almost every other type of cooperative, worker cooperatives really are trying to make money. They're trying to run profitable as you can businesses, because those profits are providing wages, benefits, and profit, shared profit to those workers. And then just a few of the basics. It is one thing I like to stress, all cooperatives are corporations, but they're membership-based corporations. What we typically think of as a corporation is a capital-based corporation, where one person can own 20%, one person owns 50%, one person owns 10%. That's a capital-based corporation. You own a share of it based on the amount of investment. With a membership-based corporation, it is just that. It is that's where the idea of the one member, one share, one vote comes from. And that's the ownership structure. So it is a corporation, but it is a membership-based corporation. Workers do buy a share. They do invest directly in the worker cooperative. They buy a share and they directly own the business. Not all workers in the company need to be owners, and owners don't necessarily have a guarantee of employment. So no company that I've worked with has 100% of the employees become worker owners. There are always, maybe it's half, maybe it's 2/3, maybe it's 3/4, but it's never an expectation and it's never happened. And then the material benefit is that they're getting a share of the net income on an annual basis. So I'm going to give you some examples of some companies that I've worked with, just to give you a perspective on different sizes, different industries, to see how this is played out. And I'm going to do it in this context of this notion of immediate exit, and that could be lack of planning, it could be death or disability of the primary business owner manager. It could be a bankruptcy situation. I will say right now, it's doable. It's not desirable to deal with it in that situation because it's inevitably rushed. And you're dealing with other external pressures that you'd rather not deal with. Ideally, we're helping people with phased exits, right? Like they're planning a few years at least in advance and getting the business ready and getting the workers ready. And it's a phased, methodical, intentional process. And then lastly, I'll give you a couple of examples of what I call restructuring for growth, where this is not about exit planning. It's about mid-stage entrepreneurs who've built a great company. They've gone from 1 employee or 2 employees to 15 or 20 employees, and they can't grow it anymore under the current structure. They may also have kids and they would like to spend time with them, so on and so forth. So it's really a restructuring, a way to keep growing a company into a new stage, and there's no intention by the primary business owner of leaving. So it's not about exit planning, it's about growth. So first example, the Island Employee Cooperative. This was 2 grocery stores and an Ace Hardware store on an island off the end of a peninsula off the coast of Maine. Very remote, very isolated community. This was one of the largest employers on the island. Stonington, Maine is considered the lobster capital of the world. More lobsters come through Stonington, Maine than anywhere else. That's its claim to fame. But this is the only source of groceries for 45 minutes away. You have to go off the island, up the peninsula to get to the next grocery store. So there's 2 villages on the island. The larger grocery store is in the larger village, the medium-sized grocery store is in the smaller village, and then the Ace Hardware. This is the example of a business owner who just didn't bother. Just when he was ready to retire, he contacted a business broker, and they marketed the business, and 2 years later, he was still waiting, and he wanted to retire 2 years ago. So one thing led to another. He was introduced to me. We met, we talked to the employees. Because so much time had passed, he was definitely agitated to want to retire. And so this was definitely rushed. I mean, we did this very large, very complicated deal in just under 12 months. I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't want to do it again, but we did it. They're a good business. They're a good group of employees, good group of worker owners, and that's one example. Large grocery and the Ace Hardware. This is thinking in terms of sometimes it's good to think big. I think there's too often in the cooperative, people think about cooperatives, they think about these micro businesses, and this is an example of a giant business. This is in Quebec. This was a business, a mill that had gone bankrupt 3 times in less than a decade, and finally people had had enough, and so members of the community, local businesses, the workers, the logging contractors who supplied this mill all joined together and formed a multi-stakeholder cooperative centered around the workers in the mill, but there were others who were part of that ownership structure. They took it over out of bankruptcy on the third go round. They have grown. They're super stable. They've diversified their business lines. 2008, at the cratering of the housing industry, home building industry, was one of their record years. And now in a town of about 2,000 people, the mill alone employs just over 600 people. So you can imagine this is an existential piece of this town's economy, obviously, and everything around the supply chain of a business this large, the impact that this had. So this is another example. This doesn't happen every day by a long shot, but I like to use it as an example of it's important to dream big and go after big opportunities like this if ever they present themselves. This idea of a phased exit, this has elements of everything about what I've described about exit planning. The gentleman in the middle, Ralph, this business was started by his parents as a Western Auto in the early 60s. He never wanted anything to do with the business. He was he went to college, became a community college teacher. His father died, and he gave up his career to go back home to take care of his mother, to run this business for his mother. And that was in the mid 70s. He tried for a year or two, once a decade, for 3 decades to sell this business, and then gave up. Finally, when he was into his 70s, one of his customers, who happened to know me or know who I was, this is in New York, very small town, very rural, upstate New York. And he reached out to me, and we were able to do this pretty quickly because he just wanted to work less. He didn't want to retire immediately, but he did want to work less, and he wanted to train sort of some younger people to take over this business. So this Ace Hardware is great. They're doing great. The young woman, or the only woman, is now the general manager, and he's mentoring her. He's staying on and sort of chairing the board and just being a mentor to the whole operation. And you can put me on the schedule for 20 hours a week. I'll stock shelves. I'll do whatever. So he's getting what he wants out of it, and this business is sustaining. So restructuring for growth. You know, this is as I described. This was Earth Designs Cooperative is a landscaping company started by a woman, her in a truck, an amazing landscape designer, very high-end clients. This is in the Hudson River Valley in New York. But after about 15 years, she had upwards of 20 employees. She was still the only point of contact with every client. She was the only, she was the foreman on every job. She was working 60 to 80 hours a week, and she was a single mom. And that was not sustainable by a long shot, obviously. So this was really all about vesting employees. I would say there's also the issue of skilled trades. In skilled trades, there's nothing to stop your employees from going on their own and becoming your competition. It's a frequent story. So employee ownership is a way to vest those employees and have them stay within the firm by having an ownership stake. And it's worked extremely well. The company grew way faster, 20 to 30% growth years after the transition, and they have a great culture there. And then another example, this is a solar company. There are upwards of 20 employees. It's the same story, skilled trades, mid-stage entrepreneur, 3 young kids, never saw him, wanted his own life, wanted sustainability for his own personal life, but also wanted to vest these highly skilled employees so that they don't go out and start their own companies, basically, and become the competition. So that's them. Talk a little bit about how these transitions come together. There are advantages, there are disadvantages. The advantages of cooperative transitions, the cooperative model is extremely flexible. You can do a lot with it. So there's no cookie cutter way of doing this. There are lots of different ways they can develop. So the flexibility lends itself to the uniqueness that is small business. Every business is different, and every cooperative can be different too. It is generally low cost. We're a nonprofit. There's a mission-oriented aspect to cooperative development. There are a lot of foundations. We are funded by U.S. Department of Agriculture. We're funded by a lot of foundations to do this work, and we do fee-for-service work as well. But the fact that we can subsidize this to a great extent can really make it low cost, or sometimes no cost, depending on where it is. And we have certain foundations who support business transitions in certain locations, for example. So we can do it for no cost in that regard. It is direct ownership, so there tends to be a greater level of seriousness about it, and there is a greater burden to that too. So perhaps it's a disadvantage, but that idea of direct ownership is really meaningful to workers. And then this idea of shared risk. Most people are not meant to be entrepreneurs. It takes a certain type of personality to do that, and it's beyond what most folks are comfortable with. But this idea of shared risk, shared entrepreneurship, a lot more people, I think, can see themselves in that scenario if all the risk is not on them. But in terms of disadvantages, fundamentally, the disadvantages just have to do with unfamiliarity in the sense of risk. That comes from the business owner, it can come from the workers, it can come from seeking financing. Again, just lack of familiarity with the model, and unfamiliarity means sense of risk is perhaps the biggest. I put leadership needs just because I don't think our society does a very good job of creating leaders or building leadership skills. And you have to have good leaders. It is direct ownership, so there has to be real leadership embedded in the cooperative. And then the idea of shared reward. I mean, it's the balance of the shared risk, right? So nobody's going to get rich. Nobody's going to get a windfall from a remarkably successful business, because it is shared reward, but that is the flip side of the shared risk. There are some tax advantages. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over this, but there are some tax advantages both for the cooperative and for the owner in certain circumstances. And then the idea of what is a good candidate for a worker cooperative conversion. I mean, honestly, it's the same thing that makes any business attractive to any buyer, right? That it's a stable business, it's got a stable market, it's got a stable workforce, it's got stable cash flow, and that there is leadership in the company, absent the leadership or the capacity to grow it, a pathway to growing it within the company, absent the owner. And it is meaningful if that owner is driven by some sense of legacy, the sense of wanting to preserve what they've built, maintain its value to the community, to reward the workers that have helped them. If that is a motivating factor, then it's a very good candidate for that. I just want to point out that it's not just, we've talked a lot about sort of the transaction and how the transaction happens and what a cooperative is, but it is important to distinguish this idea between the ownership transition, which is much of what we've talked about here, and then the idea of the governance transition, like the ability to think strategically about the medium to long-term future and growth of that company. And that's the governance. And then the idea of the management transition, which I've stressed throughout, that management, operational leadership that can make the trains run on time. So being able to think about a transition and be clear about what you're talking about. Are we talking about ownership? Are we talking about who can plan for the future? Are we talking about who's running this place day to day, week to week? And then the just as a more practical step-by-step framework, and Sandra, this is not too different from what Sandra laid out, so I won't dwell on that. I do want to, if I can do this, Byram, do I have 4 minutes? What time is it? 8:02?
Yes.
Okay. I am going to, in closing, in closing, I want to let you hear from some folks. And please jump quickly and let me know if you can't hear the sound, but I think you should be able to.
We began in 1992 as the first espresso bar and bookstore in Maine. Gradually over the years, we grew and our business morphed into a full-service cafe and in a separate location, our coffee roastery, which wholesales and retails coffee. Now we've been in business for 25 and a half years and we're very much the heartbeat of the community.
Running a business is a lot of work. I mean, Suzanne has worked, 60, 80-hour weeks. It's one of the reasons she wants to retire.
I think employee ownership is important to the future, in Maine in particular, because we have an aging baby boomer business owner demographic.
Business owners are starting to age out and retire. We need to have people willing to take over the businesses that are here. The people most willing to do that are the people who are already part of those businesses.
I had been thinking about some way including employees in the business. What I was looking for were basically three things. I wanted to reward the people who had helped to build this business because I have a lot of long-time employees. And second, I wanted to ensure the succession of the business because it's such an important part of our small community. And third, I wanted to create an income stream for myself. And that really is something that the co-op gave in a way that nothing else I could think of would.
What we offer is a model for preserving businesses that can keep jobs going, keep economic activity going, preserve great community assets, and give business owners who put in a lot of hard work the retirement that they deserve.
It's just a genuinely great place to work. And yes, we have a place in the community, but ultimately to be sharing this with my coworkers who are my family, quite frankly, makes it all the more exciting.
Being a worker-owned co-op, I think there's a lot of creative energy when people come together and share ideas that you might not think about as an individual.
For me, becoming an employee owner means that I can own a business. And the fact that it's an employee owner with other employee owners is what makes it work for me. It's doable even if you have other responsibilities.
I love this business. I'm doing something that I love to do. Now I get to invest a lot of that energy that I've felt so passionate about in the business, and I get to, in a way, reward myself being one of the owners. I absolutely feel a lot more confidence, and a lot of that has to do with the people that I work with.
Cooperatives in general are a good way for communities to help build themselves. If you can bring together cooperative ownership, it's a community stake as well as an individual stake.
I hope that this transition affects the community in that sense that we'll be here. They know us, they come here every day to get their coffee, and they're excited that we'll be the ones who continue making the business grow and change with Rockland.
Rock City is sort of a center for the town in its own way. So when you get the news that Rock City is sort of in another way giving to the community again in the sense of giving its employees a way to own the business, I feel like it's just a double hurrah.
The Cooperative Development Institute has been so instrumental in helping us and in educating us. I think that our transition will be pretty smooth when it happens because we've already laid so much groundwork. I'm very excited to see what they do. I'm excited for the next generation moving the business forward. Building community ultimately is what we really wanted, and that's what happened.
But I'd let you hear from some worker owners and former business owners themselves and one stories. So that's what I had. Thanks for listening, and happy to answer questions.
All right, thank you, Rob. And we do have some questions lining up in the chat, but we'll come to that here as soon as Jennifer and Leah finish with their engagement. So Jennifer and Leah, in 2011, Leah Maciel and Jennifer Rawlison partnered with their friends Rachel, the daughter of the original Cristado's owner, and her partner Nick Stewart. They began the process of reviving and renewing the local institution by carrying on the family's traditions. In addition, each member of the foursome has a background in the arts, the culinary world, or both, and their collective dream is to combine both of these forms of expression to create an affordable, interesting, and delicious experience for others to enjoy. Leah and Jennifer, welcome to the floor.
Hi, thank you, Byram. And let me get my slides ready here for everybody. And I did that wrong. There we go. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks again, Sandra and Rob. That was some great information, and thanks everyone for joining us. As Byron said, I am Jennifer Rawlinson, and I am here with Leah Maciel, and we're going to let you know a little bit about what we've been doing and why we're looking to transition into a worker-owned cooperative. So, like Byron said, we are two of the four owners who run Cristado's bakery, cafe, and catering business, as well as Sixpence Gift Shop, which is housed inside the bakery. Myself and Leah, whom you're going to hear from shortly, along with Nicholas Stewart and Rachel Cristado, reopened Rachel's parents' bakery in 2011. The business had sold in the early 2000s, and the four of us reopened it in its new location in downtown Carbondale and added Sixpence Gift Shop. When we first reopened, our mission, our goal was, and it still is, to fuel, support, and entertain the community by offering a variety of products and services under one roof. This would feature continental cuisine and locally, regionally, and sustainably produced items. Also, a big reason for reopening is we wanted to create a place that would be able to afford employees livable wages and the opportunity for financial growth and create a fulfilling and supportive work environment. Working in a small college town, we found it was difficult to meet these goals as well as survive as a business. As a restaurant surviving in a fluctuating economy that was highly dependent on the college and its students is a struggle. Because of this, we relied on several different aspects of the business to keep it running for the months the college was in session versus not in session. This included a bakery for walk-in and pre-order services, including wedding cakes, a cafe with indoor seating and walk-in service for to-go items, catering for the college, catering for meetings and events, other local businesses, weddings, parties, as well as camp during the summer slower months. We also hosted bands and art shows on the weekends and ran a gift shop. This allowed us to be flexible in work arrangements with our employees to help fill the gaps for them financially as well as for the business during slow and busy times. We often supported our employees as needed, offering work arrangements that fit their needs, meals and food, or if possible, cash advances or funds if needed. Employees are integral to any business and its survival. We value our employees' input in how we ran our business, and we wanted to work together to create a service we all felt good about providing to our community. Our employees were integral to reaching these goals. It seemed our style of working mimicked that of a cooperative by having four owners with shared input and collective decision-making. This often involved employee input as well. However, we were unable to meet all of our employees' needs, such as affordable wages, benefits, etc., in our economy. Similarly, in a business structure, simply working for the business leads to less individual fulfillment and therefore less input into the success of the business. Whereas working as a whole together for the community, individuals would better visualize and determine how to meet their needs. This led us to investigate the possibility of transitioning into a worker-owned cooperative. By transitioning into a worker-owned cooperative, employees could have ownership for the work and input they provide, and it would offer the opportunity to earn more than a livable wage and receive benefits. According to Work Institute, U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, The worker-owned cooperative model has proven to be an effective tool for creating and maintaining sustainable, dignified jobs, generating wealth, improving the quality of life of workers, and promoting community and local economic development, particularly for people who lack access to business ownership or even sustainable work options. Similarly, we have worked and continue to work with local organizations to meet each other's needs and those of our community through trade of services and shared sources. For example, providing catering service and trade for advertisement, or collectively creating meals with other organizations for community fundraisers. It is this cooperative style of working with others that has allowed us to move forward. Currently, under the rainbow of the pandemic, it became even more important than ever to pull together as a community and share resources. Working this way and looking at a restaurant through the lens of what is best for the community and for the people that need food will help create a more sustainable business model while also helping tackle food insecurity in our area. This led us to look into other cooperative options that would sustain not only us, but other organizations and persons, the community as a whole, such as not only creating a worker-owned cooperative, but a cooperative of local organizations, creating a cooperative hub in our building that would provide a common space to support cooperatives, as well as shared services and resources. Together, we can not only help each other, but our community as well. Because of this, we have transitioned our business model to fit with community's needs by creating a system to feed community members that are experiencing food insecurity while supporting local restaurants and organizations. We have created the Southern Illinois Collaborative Kitchen, which now Leo will talk to you about.
Hi, I'm Leah Maciel. I'm one of the owners of Cristados and one of the co-creators of the Southern Illinois Collaborative Kitchen. You can give me a second so I could share my screen. Okay, there we go. So the Southern Illinois Collaborative Kitchen is a group that we helped create with fellow restaurant manager and the creator of the Southern Illinois Eats Facebook page, William Lowe at New Kahala. We have recently been able to register as a not-for-profit for the state of Illinois and are currently in the process of obtaining a federal not-for-profit status as well, in order to apply for grants to help continue this venture and helping food insecure people and support local restaurants. The premise of this organization was to provide meals to people who need them right now and to also support the local restaurants during the pandemic. We do this by offering meals on a sliding scale basis through our online ordering site. Payments are received in the form of a donation based on what people can pay. And for every meal that is purchased in the form of donation, it provides another meal for someone who needs it. And any amount donated over the meal cost goes to provide more meals for those who need them as well. Through donations and sponsorships, we are able to provide meals to a few organizations in our community at no cost for them to distribute. To help local restaurants in this area, we purchase meals from them for a little over the food costs to be able to help them out a bit during this time of uncertainty in the hospitality sector. We've also started to purchase produce from local farmers at a discount, and we receive overflow produce from local gardens. Between all of these organizations, we're able to meet the needs of helping fill the gaps in food insecurity and support local restaurants and sharing our resources and supporting other organizations in our community. This slide is our ordering instructions on how to donate and to sponsor the Collaborative Kitchen, because there is still more need than we are currently able to meet, which led for us to try and apply for a not-for-profit status. So we were able to have more access to grants, which would be able to help us expand how many meals we are able to do for the community. Working with other businesses has been an uplifting experience for us to be able to work together towards a common goal and put the needs of the community first. Businesses are stronger together than they are if they're operating as a singular entity. So we made this transition as the shelter-in-place order came to be in Illinois. We realized that we wouldn't be able to keep Cristados open on a carry-out model only. Our business model, which has worked in the past with our fluctuating economy in Southern Illinois, would no longer sustain us or our employees. So it seemed a better idea to temporarily close for a while readjusting our business model to better suit the upcoming challenges in the food industry. And as we talked to different community organizations, we realized that we all had common goals, including meeting the needs of food insecure neighborhoods. We found that through our shared resources that we could support more community members as well as each other and meet our goals more readily. We were quickly made aware that there was a greater number of food insecure people in our community than we were aware of. While schools were doing meals through the week, they were not being able to do the service on the weekends. Also, with the shutdown, other restaurants were losing business, especially those who rely on catering. So the idea of the collaborative kitchen, we thought, was a way to help those who needed food on the weekends, but also help local businesses as well. We have always supported our community, and our community has greatly supported us and kept Cristados open in our current location for 9 years. And we thought restructuring our business model to help out the community seemed natural and more sustainable, especially within the current climate. We hope to continue networking with these and other community organizations to create a solid, self-sustaining local support network. And so one of the other things we discovered when we were creating the collaborative kitchen was that a community kitchen or a food hub is needed in our community. When we were trying to figure out the logistics of the collaborative kitchen, we were looking for a large kitchen in which multiple restaurants could work out of and cook out of. This would allow us to order food, be able to have it delivered there, and one central location. Since many restaurants had shelter in place during the pandemic, it seemed more resourceful to have just one kitchen where all the food was kept and prepped and distributed. But we found that there was no sort of kitchen that existed in our community. And after speaking with the health department, we reverted to everyone cooking out of their own certified kitchens and picking up and delivering from each place. Similarly, the local gardens and farmers like the Washington Street Garden from the Carbondale Spring Food Autonomy have mentioned needing a place to process their produce as well. In the past, different farmers and community members have attempted to start a community kitchen, but the plans fell through for one reason or another. Now, with the uncertainty of the pandemic, a community kitchen seems more than necessary. So we've begun brainstorming with other members of the community who have expressed an interest in a community kitchen and reached out to our health department to see what we would be able to do in this regard. Our business model has naturally shifted into a community collaborative model, and this was something that we always were working towards, implementing a true cooperative model, but we were always busy with running our business without having the time or the resources to formally switch to a cooperative model. The pandemic actually created an environment that forced us to focus on how to transition into becoming specifically a worker-owned cooperative that could sustain our goals and create a sustainable food and work system. And now I will pass it back to Jennifer for the conclusion.
Okay. Here we go. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, we have a lot of ideas. So what we would like to do is to create a shared cooking space for community members and organizations to utilize to create meals for their organizations and or prep food for their businesses, a place for farmers and gardeners to produce their produce, a place to sell these farmers, gardeners, or a person's product. Create a sliding scale pay-as-you-can cafe utilizing local produce. Host classes and workshops to educate the community on local food cooking and food production. Host dinners focusing on local products. Each facet would open opportunities for worker-owned employment, creating a sustainable food network to contribute to feeding those that are food insecure and supporting local organizations and food producers. This worker-owned cooperative network would create jobs and offer ownership to community members, allowing for livable wages and opportunity for benefits And there's a little bit more. Not only would we house a community kitchen, we have been looking into ways to utilize unused areas of our building to create a co-op of cooperatives, a hub for local cooperatives. This space would be an area for cooperatives not only to work from, but a common meeting space to share ideas, resources, and to learn from one another. It is this notion of working as a group and also with others in a network that will help us grow together and make each piece more sustainable and help the whole community flourish. By creating these networks now in the current situation of a pandemic, investing locally in our own communities, we will create stronger, sustainable building blocks for the future. That is, in a nutshell, what Cristados and the Southern Illinois Collaborative Kitchen have been working towards, and we look forward to meeting these needs with our Keep Money local organizers and our other community members. Thank you. Byram?
All right, thank you, Leah and Michelle. So we are to the point now where we've heard, we have heard a lot of really good information tonight, and we are pushing up against the 7:30 timeframe. So we are going to try to get through as many questions as we can quickly, and we're probably going to go just a little bit past the 7:30, but we understand if some of our viewers do have to drop off at that point, but all of this will be recorded and it still will be available for you to come back and watch at a later point. So one of our questions is, what are the typical motivations for worker co-ops to network, especially in a nascent cooperative ecosystem? Rob or Sandra?
Sorry, I'm just unmuting there. I think it would be, businesses, cooperatives, everybody needs kind of a brain trust, I think. So that's one reason. The cooperatives, much as we think they are the best thing since, I don't know if Cristados has sliced bread, but the best thing since some kind of bread. They're not easy. And so having another cooperative that you can ask, how did you do this thing? Or, gee, I need to buy a bunch of office paper. Do you need to buy a bunch of office paper? Maybe we can go into it together. So there's, and because cooperatives are not yet as normal as they will become, it's also good to have somebody on your side, somebody who doesn't think you're crazy. I think all of those would be good reasons for networking. Plus, if you work together, you can work with government officials and others to make more friendly rules for cooperatives. So there are a lot of reasons.
Okay. Rob, do you have anything to add to that?
I just think the value of peer-to-peer sharing is just really valuable. I mean, we believe that's true in many aspects of life. So it's just as true here. It is as we've stressed, it's a unique model. It's not common. So networking with those who are trying to do the same thing can be really beneficial. Having managers talk to each other and think about the challenges of what it means to manage a cooperatively owned business. Having boards of directors, these are corporations, they have to have a board of directors. Having those boards network to learn from each other in peer-to-peer board training is extremely valuable.
And Rob, someone asked you, they're creating a local version of a CDI. Would you discuss some of the early and continuing challenges the group experienced in forming?
Well, it was 1994 when CDI started, so I wasn't there.
Okay.
I think it's the challenge of starting any nonprofit. I think what's important is that you have a clear and compelling mission and you stick to it and you don't lurch. If you're a movement building organization, then build movements. If you're a technical assistance organization, then be really good at technical assistance and be really practical about it. If you're trying to do all of those things, then, maybe, but just, I think it's the same challenges generally with nonprofits, which most I think all cooperative development centers are nonprofits.
Right. Okay. And Sandra, I know you answered some questions on here as well, but one of them was asking about the artist-related cooperative you mentioned? Is that one of the ones you answered through the questions in the chat, or?
I did put a link in there for the artist cooperative. It's the Zuni. You can tell these are artists who know their branding. They named their co-op the Ancestral Rich Treasures of Zuni, ARTZ. And so I did put the link in there. They have an online store, so please, everybody, do your holiday shopping.
Okay.
I'd be happy to tell you more about them as well.
Okay. Well, and we'll try to get through just a couple more questions here. One of them was talking about how do potential worker owners that are low income or poor or with poor credit typically buy into a co-op? Is that more of a Rob?
Some of those in the chat. So
yeah, we answered.
Is that what I answered too?
I tried to get answers out into the chat. So if it's the one thing I didn't address, I did answer this question specifically, but I didn't mention the poor credit thing. There's no credit checks in buying a share in the cooperative. It's important, like, conceptually to understand that these are corporations. They are completely separate legal entities, and these workers are becoming shareholders in that entity. The corporation owns the business, they're shareholders. So it's not a partnership, right? It's not an LLC. The bank isn't going around doing credit checks on each shareholder and requiring, loan guarantees, and people put their house up as collateral. You can only lose what you put into it. If it's a $1,000 share and you've got another $10,000 in equity, yeah, you could lose $11,000. But if a business goes bankrupt and there's $100,000 in debts, nobody's coming after you. They can't.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm trying to look through here, and it looks like you have answered most of these. Trying to think if there's any that we've missed. We can always come back and try to post those again later. Did either of you? So there's a question about the Puget Consumer Co-op in Seattle with the Farmland Trust. Do either of you work with farmers?
I think we do, but I think that was specifically related to a conversion, I thought.
Okay. All right. Well, it does look like you've answered most of them, and we are up against the time here. We want to allow that. We will hang around if you want, as we did at the last session after the official wrap up, but we want to make sure those that are on a tight time schedule, we want to get a little bit of information out to them. So as you know, this is the third in a series of 4. Our next event is on November 17th at 6 p.m. This next webinar focuses on worker cooperatives and on revolving loan funds. And we will be hearing again from Michael Schumann on local investing, and from Kristen Barker of the Co-op of Cincy, and Chuck Paprocki from Carbondale Spring. We have set up discussion groups to develop projects for community business development on thecleannetwork.com as a follow-up to these webinars. You can find all of this information, as well as links to our previous webinars and how to donate to this ongoing initiative at keepingmoneylocal.com. Thanks again for joining us tonight, and we're all thankful that everyone was here, especially when we're all focusing on staying healthy amongst this pandemic. We hope to see you all next week, and anyone that would like to stick around for a little bit, if there's more questions, we'll be here to do that. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Yes. I think, let's see if there's anything else that came on here at the end. I think we answered them all.
There was an interesting question from Sarah, and I don't know if Sarah has left, but the question about, like, kind of what type of industry, what was it? Where'd it go? Worker co-ops make more sense for labor-intensive businesses.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true. Worker co-ops make sense for businesses that, like, have stability and have that are a decent business. If it's a viable business, it can be a viable worker-owned business.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate it. It looks like we did get through all of them. We'll be able to save those. I know we recorded this, so Amy, are you going to save the chat so we can go through and summarize those again later?
Yeah, I'm going to save it.
Okay. All right.
What I'm wondering is, okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So it's a corporation and you can only lose what you put in. But when you're a worker, you're not buying based on what the work you put in. You're just putting your money into the business, basically.
Right. So in a worker cooperative, the price of a share has no relation whatsoever to the book value of the business. Think of it as a membership fee, which is it's called a share price, but it's also frequently called a membership fee. So if there's 10 people or 100 people, the share price could be $500, $1,000, or $10,000. In no instance does any of those numbers have anything to do with the value of the enterprise itself. That's just a separate thing.
And then so when you have different employees, you're paying them different salaries based on the level they're at, the work they're putting in, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, they are businesses. People should be paid what they're worth. They should be paid what the business can bear, what the market offers. You should offer the most competitive wages and benefits you can as a business. The difference is what happens with the profits generated by that business. That is equitably distributed to those who are owners based almost always on hours worked. So you may be making 15 bucks an hour and work 20 hours a week, or you may be making $30 an hour and working 40 or 50. You may be the manager, right? And making a lot more money. But at the end of the year, in wages, right? But at the end of the year, if you're both co-owners of that business, you will get an equitable share of the net income generated, the profits of the business, based on how much you work. And that's the legal textbook definition of patronage. It's the notion of doing business with, right? So if you're a lobsterman as a member of a lobster co-op, your patronage is based on how many lobsters you process through it, like 10,000 pounds or 100,000 pounds. Or if you're a grain farmer, not a grain farmer, but a farmer, and you're part of a grain cooperative, right? So that notion of patronage applies in the same way, but it applies toward the profits of the business.
There were quite a few questions there, so I've been kind of scrolling up and down to see if there's anything else left, and I think everything else has been answered there.
Wait, I got another one.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Well, Rob, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I took a quick scroll through and tried to hit specifically things that seemed to be geared at what I said. I think I got them all.
Okay, I guess, Sandra, I just wanted to know a little more about the services you guys are providing, and also as a question for both of you, like what are the most common things that people need as far as your services go?
So let me I think actually what we provide is similar in a lot of ways, but let me jump into your last question first. I think what people think they need and what they actually need are two different things. When they're starting off on a cooperative, what they think they need is a legal structure. I want to know what I'm going to be. I've got to file my incorporation papers. I've got to get my bylaws organized. And we spend a lot of time saying those are outcomes. So what you need to do first is figure out what you want to be. And then once you figure out what you want to be, the incorporation, the bylaws, the policies and procedures will follow. Don't put the cart before the horse. So that's a constant. And then, I think otherwise people need basically the same things they need starting a business. You need to know who is going to be, who are your members going to be, how are decisions going to be made, how are you going to bring revenue in, how are you going to spend it. So all those things, same things, just with a different slant.
Okay, and when you said, sorry, I just wanted to.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Amy.
When you say what they want to be, so you mean like, what do you mean by that exactly?
Oh, sorry. What's their vision? What's their mission? That's a piece of it. Another piece of it is, what kind of a cooperative do I want to be? Do I want to be a worker-owned cooperative? Or are there other people who are also stakeholders who want to be involved? And should they be members, or should they be on the sidelines?
Okay, thank you. All right, Rob, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Excuse me. I just want to say, I think what Sandra said is right on. Generally, the other thing I think generally that people who come to us need is, and not to be flip about it, but they just need a reality check, right? Like they need somebody, they need to sort of put their idea out there and have somebody objectively like pick it apart a little bit and like stress test it. Because people get really attached to their ideas, and that's passion, and that's awesome. But so there's that. The substantive answer I wanted to give that's different than Sandra's is, for CDI, we have not completely, but we've shifted away a lot from the very generalist cooperative development. Just like anybody who comes to us is like, I've got an idea and there's 3 of us and we want to do this thing. And we've just created programs that are just very focused, like sectorally, strategically focused. So I don't do anything about cooperative development. I don't even talk to startups. Like if somebody is like, I want to start a worker cooperative, there's 3 of us that want to do this thing. Like I could put you in touch with somebody who can help you with that. But that's not what I do. I work with existing businesses and help them transition. And in doing that, I can just be really focused, and I can be very templated in how I do what I do. I can bring them bylaws that are like 90% of the way done. I've got structures, I've got a management training program. I've got it, I can move it along pretty quickly and efficiently because I just stay strategically focused in that way. And our housing program is just as focused. Our housing program only works with mobile home parks on transitions away from investor-owned parks into resident-owned parks. So it's just like, we can do it quick, right? Because particularly in that, like, honestly, you've seen one mobile home park, you've seen most of them. There are slight variations, but they all operate exactly the same way. They're like the world's easiest business to run. It's guaranteed cash flow. It's 100% collateralized, right? Like it's an easy deal to do if you know how to do it, and and you've got your training programs all lined up. So I just wanted to point that out, that what CDI does, and we still pick up the phone for like the generalist inquiries, but we have moved pretty far away we have one person that does that. Out of around 30 employees, all of us work in very specific, strategic, sectorally focused ways.
Okay, so are these, thank you for that answer. And I was just wondering, are these type of templates and things, is that the type of thing you can share, or is that specific to your region, or how does that work?
No, for the work that I do, I'm not proprietary. I mean, I'll share anything. And I've been working with Sandra since spring, I think. Just sort of doing some trainings when they have time for like how they could develop a practice in New Mexico, like what I do in New England. So I don't think there's anything I have that I haven't given to you to look over, Sandra. And there's also a lot of tools and templates that are developed nationally by the Workers to Owners Collaborative. And we all work very collaboratively. Like if somebody comes up with some new assessment and they're like, I tried this out on this business and it worked well. And like, we all share and perfect things because it's in all of our best interests. With the resident cooperative work, it's not necessarily, it's somewhat proprietary. We are a member of what's called ROC USA, Resident Cooperatives USA, which is a national network of these certified technical assistance providers, of which CDI is one. And I don't know how many there are around the country, but I think there's, I don't know how many there are, but cover a good portion of the country. And that's pretty proprietary. Like they develop tools, templates, processes, and if you're going to be a certified technical assistance provider and do this work with them or under their umbrella, you have to use their stuff and do it their way. And you know, there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay. Have you, I'm sorry, I swear this is my last question. Have you seen organizations in the past like what Jennifer and Leah are trying to do, and what has been your experience with that type of organization, both Sandra and Rob?
I think Sandra would have more experience than I would.
Yeah, we have, so in Albuquerque, Albuquerque is kind of a foodie town. And there is kind of a food related ecosystem, not really the same as what Christado's is doing, but you know, some of the elements are similar. There's a street food institute which helps people learn. It's associated with a community college, and it's for people who want to learn how to make street food. And they also do catering, and they have a large kitchen that people cater out of, and they have also taken some of the same actions that Christado's has done. There's Three Sisters Kitchen, which is a community kitchen, and then there's the South Valley Economic Development Center, which has a commercial kitchen. And they're all separate organizations, but they work together to help develop the food ecosystem and there's another group called Delicious New Mexico, which is the distributor that works with all of them. And so they're kind of, and there are other elements too, which keep going through my head. Oh, there's this and this, but it's all kind of an ecosystem in the same way that you're looking at it. And I really do think that however your ecosystem creates itself, it's the ecosystem piece that's important, because you know but there are so many small organizations, you have to play with one another well.
Jennifer, Leah, any questions?
All right.
Yeah, just following up on that, I think what you guys are doing is really, really cool.
Yeah.
It's going to make a huge difference locally. It already is, and it's just changing people's viewpoint. It's very cool.
Hope to. We have a lot of moving parts, but there seems to be a lot of people that are interested in trying to make this work. But also hearing from you and Rob and the things that you've been doing makes it seem more tangible, actually, in some of the different possibilities of working it out. I mean, even if it's just a little small part, we can still build off of it, and just keeping the community in mind. And like you said, the little ecosystem, because there are so many different individual organizations doing the same stuff, and they seem to be fighting, not like fighting, but you know, we're all working for the same goal. So why not pull it all together? I mean, it's so much easier for everybody to just share their resources and meet those goals rather than all of us spinning the same wheels over and over and bumping into each other as we go along. So we'll see.
Absolutely. And
Just to point on that, we do have this cooperative ecosystem, and everybody does now work together. It didn't start out that way, and it didn't spend 5 years that way. So it's hard work.
Yeah.
Well, I'm optimistic too that over the last few years we've seen not only what started with Carbondale Spring and what they're doing, but with Southern Illinois as a whole, because we have people like, so Brooke, who's on this call and is part of the planning committees in Murfreesboro. We had Alex from Harrisburg, and while I think I was joking with Brooke, when I grew up in Murfreesboro, until age 15, I thought the world ended at, about the place where they just built the culvers on the other side of Carbondale. I thought that was the end of the world. I didn't know that anything was further east of that, because that's just all the further I traveled as a very young child. And now we don't think anything about traveling back and forth between the Carbondale, Marion, and Murfreesboro and other places, because they're all important, and we have to find ways to survive there. Now, the drives to St. Louis are a little harder. Obviously, we don't need to be up there if we can support ourselves down here. But I'm very much encouraged by that. We're Southern Illinois, and we need things here. It doesn't matter whether it's 10 feet to one side or 10 feet to the other side. It's all going to help us with our local economies. And so I'm very optimistic with what I've seen. A few years back, I think every town fought against each other, and I don't think we're seeing that right now, and that's good, because we don't have the ability. If we're going to fight each other, then we're all going to lose. So my 2 cents, right?
Well, thanks for putting this on. Thanks for inviting me. Voice from the North, I guess.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sandra and Rob and Jennifer and Leah. That's really exciting what you guys are doing. And I look forward to working with all of you more on this stuff. And I'm sure I'll be bugging Sandra and Rob lots more questions. And
yeah, keep in touch. If you want to develop something, we do consulting work and help others. And there's lots who do. There's a network out there across the country that will help. If you wanted to do more intentional cooperative development, if there was energy and resources to do that.
Like train the trainers?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. There's a good network of cooperative development centers around the country who would be happy to pitch in and help see something develop in that region. You can go to cooperationworks.org, I think.
Oh no, I think it's co-op.
What is it? I forget what it is. I'll send it to you. And that's like a website that's the network of cooperative development centers around the country. And then I mentioned the Workers to Owners Collaborative. That's cooperationworks.coop.
Yeah,
I think. And that's more generalist cooperative development centers. And then, in the worker cooperative conversion world, there's the Workers to Owners Collaborative. There's a national network there. Happy to if there's an interest in that type of work, developing capacity in your region, there's that network. There's a whole national network of food system, food cooperative, local food development folks. So there's a lot of there's a lot of resources out there, and I think because of COVID, there's much more openness to like not feeling hemmed in by your, like I'm in Maine. I work throughout New England, but I could just as well be there, right?
Yeah.
So it's so much easier, and people are comfortable with it now. I think we've gotten past whatever geographic boundaries we felt kept us hemmed in before, and are willing to jump in anywhere and help out. So
yeah, absolutely.
And I think just following on that same point, I think those of us who are in this field kind of see this as a call to action moment. You know, we've got a tool that needs to get out there.
Yeah.
So I think people people like Rob and others, everybody's kind of working crazy hours trying to make sure that we support the need that we see.
Like tonight.
Let me also just mention quickly, Cooperation Works they have a 3-part training program, and you can join it at any point, but their second part is starting next week. So if anybody wants to really quickly jump in,
Wow.
It's called Toolkit, and so if you go on their website, you'll see it there.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I'm going to check out. I have to go.
Okay, thank you so much.
It's past your bedtime, Rob.
I'm an hour ahead.
I know, it's so late
Sorry.
there. It's like catch the morning.
My 7-year-old is knocking at my door. So
Thanks so much, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All right.
Sandra.
Thanks, everyone. We appreciate it. And
Thank you very much. Keep up the great work.
Thank
absolutely.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.